Everyone to the first. Got it. So one of the first things I will say before I forget is we are recording and we are asking that everyone turn their cameras off today other than those who are presenting. So thank you in advance for that. Welcome to our first roundtable meeting of 2022-23. We're very happy to have you, and the numbers have just been great. I know this is a fantastic topic. This is the second of our three-part series in the student support series. So today we're discussing leveraging multiple departments for increased retention recruitment. I hear this so much from schools, so I know this is going to be really great. But before I let you go, I want to remind you, and Bob White, I see you here, that February 16th, be sure and look for the registration for the February 16th meeting. Bob will be giving us updates, and it is always one of our most popular sessions of the year, so you don't want to miss it. And I just want to remind you that we do not record it, so you really do need to set aside time to join us. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie, one of our committee members and the ringleader of today's session.
Oh yeah, I like ringleader better than moderator, I think. So yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Mackenzie Bishop, and like Lori said, I am one of the committee members for the roundtable, and I'm super excited about today's panel. I did want to just share a really quick screen about with the introductions coming up here soon. But like I said, my name is Mackenzie Bishop, and I work for virtual internships. But prior to working for virtual internships, I came from international education, and specifically in the English language program world of bringing students here to learn English before finishing their or pursuing their degree here in the US. So my background's in international ed, and I am so excited to be able to moderate this panel and discuss and introduce our esteemed panelists. So today we have Miss Amanda Hager, who is International Admissions Counselor and Recruiter for the University of St. Thomas, Minnesota. We also have Tyler King, who's the Executive Director of International Affairs at Lewis University. And then we have Nick Simmons, who is the Executive Director and Assistant Dean of Students for the Office of International Affairs at University of Chicago. And lastly, we have Geet Vinayak, who is the Director of Office of International Student and Scholar Services at Northwestern University. So thank you all four of you for coming to be a part of this panel. We're super excited to hear all of your feedback. And in particular, we have totally different types of institutions joining. So it's going to be a lot of really great perspectives. But to take a step back, I just wanted to kind of talk to the group about how this panel came to be. And it's really because of higher education is in such a state of flux right now. I would say it's always in a state of flux, but right now things continue to evolve pretty rapidly. Student perceptions are changing, student motivations are changing. If you were to go on to Inside Higher Ed right now, I just wrote down a couple of the trending topic articles right now. One is hard truths that higher education has evaded for too long. Another one is survey finds recent grads emotionally unprepared for work. That one was kind of sad for me to see. If you go onto the pie right now, you can see that the topics include, travel and student mobility still being impacted by COVID, new investments happening in different markets around the world, coordinated approaches to different international student markets. And then I think even here, the conversation about the extent to which the US has bounced back in international education is different between who you talk to. So has it bounced back across the board? Is it 4-year schools versus 2-year schools? Is it high ranked schools versus low ranked schools? Does rank even matter anymore? All of these sorts of questions are impacting what we do as international educators. So, and the last thing I think I would touch on with that is, on top of all of that, domestic enrollments are changing with students too, right? There are fewer college age domestic students, and of those students, there's a lot of internal movement here within the United States. And I think that can put a lot of pressure on international offices to produce more and recruit more, and also to focus on retention. So that's a little bit about how this panel came to be and where the idea came out of. And so I wanted to start by talking about what your individual roles are and how your office is situated within the institution, both figuratively and literally. And I guess we can go in order of how I introduce you. So Amanda, did you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. So hi, I'm Amanda. I'm the lone Minnesotan on the board. So thanks. I'm from outside Chicago though, so I have Illinois street cred. Thanks for having me today. As far as we're organized, so as you saw, I work in international admissions as recruitment counseling. We do the whole thing from inquiry. And then, when they come and confirm, I help with orientation and arrival stuff too. But we're actually situated in the same office as OISS, and we all report to the same director. So our director, who some of you know, Lori Friedman, is the director of OISS, which does include international admissions, which is a little bit different than maybe other people have. It's the dream. If you don't have it, I'm telling you, it's great. Because then we have our students. I know them the whole way through OPT, and that sense of community is huge. But also as a team, it's the population the whole time of ours. So it's a nice, smooth transition. Yep.
Thanks. Tyler?
Sure. Thanks, Mackenzie. I'm Tyler from Lewis University, just outside of the city of Chicago. At Lewis, we are set up with what's called the Office of International Affairs, and International Affairs oversees both all enrollment, everything from marketing, promotion, and the full admissions and onboarding process. And then we have additional staff that are dedicated specifically to international student services, consisting, mostly of DSOs and student advisors, but also dedicated a bit to student programming. So it is a single office, and we do report to a single vice president, but it is specifically dedicated to the full spectrum, start and end of an international student's life.
Awesome, thanks. Nick?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mackenzie, and to certainly the other panelists this afternoon, I guess, already. The Office of International Affairs at the University of Chicago sits within the Division of Campus and Student Life that is within the Provost's office. We support student mobility for sure, so international students, at every level, and visiting students, as well as the employment-based program at the university across the board, and provide that support certainly for the university, but also for affiliated national labs on joint appointments, the hospital at the university, and a number of other centers that also include campuses outside of the United States. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, Geet.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again, Mackenzie, for inviting me to be on the panel. It's such an honor. And so for us at Northwestern, the Office of International Student and Scholar Services is under the Provost Office and more directly under the Buffett Institute. And we have partner offices as Study Abroad and Global Safety and Security. But for OISS, we kind of take on after admission. So we don't do the recruitment. Our recruitment is very siloed. We have undergraduate admissions and we have all types of different graduate admission offices. But when it comes to issuing the I-20s and the DS 2019s, that's all managed through us. So we do have a lot of hands-on from the start to the end of the student cycle, which is really nice. And then we also manage all of the employment. We have a total of 7,000 students and scholars, and that's a really exciting time to be on campus, but also very overwhelming sometimes with a small and mighty team.
Sure. Thank you guys so much for providing that picture of where your office is housed. I think it's important for us as listeners to kind of understand that, because where our office is positioned might make it a little bit easier to facilitate collaboration with certain departments than others. And the support coming from senior leadership as well, I think plays a role in that too. So I mentioned in the beginning when I was doing the introduction that student motivations and perceptions continue to evolve as they are coming here to the US. And so I was wondering if you could speak on a very general level about the importance of collaborating with different departments in order to support either the recruitment side or the retention side. And if you have found an appetite coming from those other departments coming to you first, as opposed to you seeking them out. And I'll just kind of open that up and let you guys answer on your own.
I can just say, from my perspective, I'm pretty new to my position. I started during COVID. So I will say collaboration has been a key. And I think, for a lot of my peers and what I hear from my staff is that, COVID really changed the idea of collaboration. I think, with COVID, the plea of international students and scholars was very elevated. And so now I think we're seeing a shift in the culture, and that's really exciting for us, where people are coming to us before we're going to them. And I think that that's the trend that I hope that continues, because a lot of people realize what kind of challenges our international students face. And that wasn't so highlighted before COVID. I mean, maybe it was in the Trump era, but I think COVID really pushed that envelope, and it's been a really important part of the work that we do.
So then actually a follow-up to that question, are the offices that are seeking you out more on a problem solution sort of a basis, or more on a proactive, we want to get more and we want to do more to help our students?
So what we're seeing is it's more proactive because it's on people's minds, and we're seeing it at the policy level, and we're also seeing it at, the student affairs level as well. Like, people are thinking about, as they're designing new programs, or they're thinking about, orientation as an institution, they're coming to us and saying, well, what about the needs of the international students and scholars? And that's really exciting for us.
That's excellent. Tyler, what about on your side? You guys have two completely different institutions, but your office is very centralized and very focused on kind of like the strategic plan of internationalization. So have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I would say we see a little bit of both, and it really kind of depends on the issue. In terms of recruitment and how collaboration fits into our recruitment initiatives, it does tend to be a bit more like us leading, where we reach out to particularly the career service office, because so many of our potential future students are very, very career focused, career minded. So we want to make sure that we're sort of leading a lot of our recruitment efforts with the career services office in mind, and the different types of programmings and offerings that they can provide to potential students, because we know that that's what students are looking for. But then on the student service side of things, it's very similar to what Geet mentioned, where I would say more than I've ever seen, in the past 10 years, where you have offices that are reaching out to us saying, how can we be more supportive? How can we provide better assistance? How can we be a better ally or advocate for the international students? And it's it happens in the classroom, where we get professors, faculty members asking about these things. But it's really across campus. It's everywhere, where we do consistently see and more frequently see other offices outside of international affairs coming to us saying, how can we provide a better service to the international population here? But it is very encouraging to see.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nick, have you found that to be true as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we observed through COVID was, kind of a back to basics approach to just, everything, right? I mean, it was that was the case for us in terms of, the immigration work we do for the university. But I think for our campus colleagues and units and departments across, the entire organization, they were, that there wasn't the same level of collaboration, right? I mean, everybody, kind of went back to their basic, core function, and it was a bit of a reset, in a way. I don't necessarily know that collaboration has ramped up in the same way that, maybe it was pre-pandemic, but I think what has happened is, there's greater awareness across that network of support. And that contributes, I think, to the retention. If we're doing our job to the best, of our ability in terms of, supporting students through the immigration process, we know that, our campus colleagues, in career services or counseling and health services or elsewhere, are doing the same, and all of that in support of, I think there's a big focus on retention, but student success, more to the point, right? It's everyone is, working together, to that end, in a certain way. So I think it'll be interesting to see, how things progress. I think there is greater emphasis, not just on students, but awareness of, awareness of and for those of us actually, working in these spaces in support of students, whether they're international or domestic. And I think that's been, kind of new, in the past 18 months, or so. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for that. And to go back to something Tyler said, you mentioned the difference between the recruitment process and the post-arrival process on how proactive people are. So let's kind of start getting into a little bit more tangible ideas of things that you all have done and talk about the recruitment side. So we'll start with Amanda. I'd love to hear from you about how you have worked with other departments on campus, whether they're functional departments or academic departments, to support your recruitment initiatives.
Yeah, thanks. The ones that come to mind, especially because of the way that we're situated with admissions being a part of OISS, is the domestic admissions partners that we have, whether it's like the people who do marketing, people who do social media, or it's just the CRM team that we all work with, and how we can make sure that students get through our pipeline, our funnel better. So from recruitment and inquiry all the way through, it's a better process for those students. But for the one I really sticks to mind for me is the social media partnership. They have within the last 2 years gotten someone new, and that's a big part of their job. And the fact that she's reached out a ton to collaborate with me, since I do that for our office for OISS and admission side, to make sure that the international lens is there, to make sure that we're being highlighted, to make sure that international students are also included in all this content that she's producing, that us as international admissions counselors, recruiters are present across the university's social media channels, YouTube. I think that's been really helpful because, a lot of times I'm sure we've all experienced, people are like, your students, international. And I'm like, no, it's our students. It's all our students. And when people make the effort in that way, that it's our students, I think it affects the students who are involved, right? The ones of my student workers that are in these spaces of social media, but also just people's perceptions who are staff and recruiting alongside me, but maybe in, they see international students at local high schools or community colleges. It's much more, I think, present now. And it's getting, I think, to be on people's minds more, especially for us, we've had leadership changes in a very cool way, where our provost is actually a former international student himself. The new VP for enrollment has worked with international students. So it's like, it comes up a lot from that side. So it's kind of like what Kate was saying, it's cool to see the proactive and people reaching out and thinking of you, mentioning international more often than it has in the past.
Have you seen, aside from marketing efforts, have you seen more collaboration maybe with different faculty on the recruitment side to get more students in the door and to reach more students?
Yeah, definitely. Our office hosts like an international faculty and staff meeting, I guess, for lack of a better word. There's drinks, it's fun. But it's like a way for anybody who has, whether I identify as such, or they have connections, or maybe they work with a lot of international population. And it's been really cool to see how the international staff faculty actually are like, oh, here, I'm from, name it. Here's my niece, my nephew are applying. Here's my connections. Here's my input on places you should go. Here's how I would love to help you, whether it's touring their, department or being on a panel. If they have language abilities, we've had faculty volunteer to do, different language abilities. We were going to have a Chinese thing, and then of course COVID hit, so that ruined that. But it's coming back. We're going to do some actuarial science stuff in Chinese eventually, and so that's been really nice to tap into the resources that we already have on campus, and where's the larger reach of their presence and their communities that they come from or have plugged into here.
Yeah, that just reminds me of a conversation that we all had in the past where we talked about utilizing alumni for their reach, but you're utilizing the faculty for the reach that they already have. That's really exciting. Tyler, what about you? I know that you guys have done a lot on kind of an organizational level to bring in and create kind of new positions to aid in the recruitment cycle?
Yes, so one of the things that we started here at Lewis right in the middle of the pandemic was to, because we weren't traveling anymore, and we were quickly seeing the number of students, the demand was still there, but how they were going to learn about us certainly needed to change. And for a university like Lewis, we can't really just sit back and rely on like a fancy website or brand name recognition. We need to be a little more proactive in how we get ourselves out in front of students. And a lot of that is just really like offering that personal connection with students. But when you can't travel, you lose that ability. So we immediately pivoted our recruitment efforts into in-country representation, where we were able to find individuals who became direct employees of the university, but are work permanently remote, just like everyone else was doing. And they were our person on the ground. They knew the culture, they knew the language, they knew the educational system in those countries. And they really became an incredibly valuable asset who were able to still convey that personal connection, that high support service that a school like Lewis needs to convey to students in order to successfully recruit. So it certainly did, to go back to your question about collaboration. This was a new venture for my university, and it certainly took a lot of buy-in from leadership across multiple departments in order to get something like this started. So it took a tremendous amount of assessment and evaluation of who we were going to hire and how we were going to hire them, and how it was, how that position was structured and overseen and evaluated. And it certainly wasn't just one office saying we need this. It was buy-in from across multiple different offices, but it's been very successful for us.
Sure, that makes sense. Really being able to position yourself in front of students where they're at, and like you said, essentially building the trust by having someone there in country that they can see in person and talk to. I can't remember if it was at the beginning of this or if it was in a previous conversation, but I know you've spoken a lot about how students are looking towards career earlier and earlier, and that has kind of been more of a focus for you on the recruitment side. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, so Lewis University we're very heavy on the graduate side of international students. We're about 80% of our international population is graduate students. As you know, they have a little different needs, different wants in terms of international education and studying here. And so as you know, a lot of the graduate international students are just laser focused on CPT, OPT, and jobs. So we were able to work there. We've always worked very closely with the Career Service Office at Lewis, but over time have been able to find an international student specialist within the Career Service Office who her one and only job is dedicated to CPT, OPT, and helping international students navigate the job search, and help them sort of navigate the intricacies of CPT and OPT employment here. So having that type of asset has become very, very valuable to us. Really, like all through the full process. I mean, we certainly work that into our marketing and recruitment strategy, where we want students to know that we do have someone here who does specialize in and is going to support international students as they are seeking these types of positions. But then, when students do arrive, they meet her during the new student orientation, and they sit down and she does sessions, and throughout the semester does workshops throughout a student's time with us to really sort of reinforce the fact that we promoted this to you, up front, and you can utilize this service. It is dedicated specifically to you. And we have received nothing but positive feedback from students from it. And to sort of looking at the other side of this is a lot of companies have reached out to us specifically and said it's fantastic to see that you guys do have someone who can kind of speak directly to us, because a lot of, unless there are these big companies that are used to handling international students and CPT and OPT type requests, when an employer who may need to fill a vacant position and sees a non-US citizen applying may immediately sort of disregard them, just out of unfamiliarity with it. So she not only acts as, support for our students, but again, like, serves this advocacy role amongst potential employers who we've partnered with, and sort of helps those companies, fill vacancies with our students. So it's sort of a win all the way around.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really innovative and creative way to meet students where they are and really support them through their journey and what's really important to them. On the recruitment side, we've mostly been talking so far about kind of raising the awareness of the institution, but I'm curious if Nick and Geet have any insight into, a student applies, but they're not here yet. Have you seen any sorts of collaborations where you're really focusing on actually getting the student to the actual institution post application?
Yeah, I mean, I can just add, from our perspective, again, we don't do so much as the recruitment side, but once students are like admitted, I think, that's where we see a lot of collaboration, because we have like a lot of cohort programs where there's students that are coming in the cohort and they're all admitted together, but then they're kind of like, what's next? And so we've done a lot of work with those partners to do, like, even before orientation, like, what does it mean to just, what does an I-20 mean? Like, to get your immigration document, what are the next steps after that? And one of the things that we did innovative when I came on board is the person that was doing our admission work, it was just like one person. It was a very risky proposition for the institution our size, that everything is dependent on one individual. And so we really tried to see, like, okay, what is that person doing and how can we expand their role and possibly hire another team member and really work on our communication. So we actually are one of the first, offices on campus for our type of office to have a comms person. So we have an international comms person who looks at all of the way we're communicating with students, our newsletters, our website. And, is that part of recruitment? Sure, but it's really part of the bigger picture. Like, are we thinking about the audience that we're communicating to, non-native English speakers, and how are we doing it? And how often is someone looking at it? Because I think a lot of time websites or brochures or things, they get updated and then they don't get looked at for like a year or two. And so that's something that we wanted to get away from. And we wanted something to be more of like living and breathing and having that comms person looking at pretty much all of the messaging that's going out to our audience. And that's been really effective. And we've gotten some really good feedback about that.
That's super exciting. That is very exciting. A comms person in your office. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Nick.
We aren't really all that involved, in the process, at the point of admission. But I think what we know from our colleagues across the board who are making those decisions is that, to Tyler's earlier point, the travel has reduced, budgets are maybe increasing in terms of, recruitment strategy in country. But what we hear from them is that admitted students want answers, to their questions pretty immediately. And that has to be, top of mind. And it makes sense that that actually is happening, with their admitting contact. If we're added to that mix, I think it can complicate the process, for admitted students when they're used to connecting with an admissions contact, specifically for their program. So the MBA program, for example, has a number of people who work in that, in that way, specifically for international admissions. And if we can equip them with information, or review information that they're sending, or attending, yield events, with them, I think that's, where we are playing a more, important role in, in that process. But that is really what we're hearing from our colleagues across campus, is that, what students want is pretty immediate, information or answers to their questions in order to start to build that affinity. I think that that's how we become effective, in helping our colleagues in those spaces.
Mhm. So it sounds like from the last two comments that it's really about transparency and being thoughtful about the communication and who we are talking to, and also being able to answer with expediency. And that might even go back to Tyler's point about having people in country, if that's something that we're able to do. So let's flip to post-arrival and really thinking about, Nick, as you said, not necessarily retention, but student success and the outcome of the student journey. And I think that it's equally important to really have a holistic approach to supporting students post-arrival. And really, I think right now that means leaning on more departments to make that sort of concerted effort to make sure that students are moving forward on their learning outcomes and their academic goals and their career goals. So I'm curious, just to maybe from a baseline starting point, if there are any retention goals that you have specific to your populations of international students, and what might that look like if you're able to share. So I'll start with Tyler. Let's start with Tyler.
We actually we don't set international specific retention goals. They are in line with the domestic population. So we're always kind of tracking so as long as we're in line with the domestic population, where everyone's happy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about you, Geet?
Sorry. For us, I think we were very fortunate. Retention is very high, but we're always thinking about retention. And for us, we really started to think about I just had a meeting yesterday. What does the second year experience look like for students, and the final year experience looks like with students, and how much are we going to be engaging with students, and what, other than just outside of immigration, right? So I think that's again, our number one thing. Because with the population that we serve, 7,000 international students and students and scholars, but we're really looking at what do those year two and final year look like for our students. And we're just starting to collaborate with our student success teams, because another thing that we are really cognizant about is that we don't want to create a silo, right? Because I think some of the things that's happened at our institution is that, if there's a thing that's missing, we just want to create it ourselves. And that's something that we really want to move away from. We want to collaborate with people that are doing that work, or educate, or think through what's our part and what can they do. So we're really cognizant of those kinds of things as we move forward with retention.
That makes sense. Can you speak to, I know you said you just had one meeting about it yesterday, but can you speak to kind of what the idea is behind the second year and final year, and what you would hope to get out of something like that?
Yeah, so this is something that's coming from our student success, under student engagement office. And they're really focusing on, because for us, for Northwestern, students in year one get a lot of hand-holding from their academic advisors. We're in contact with them. If they're athletes, they have their coaches. And then that kind of drops off in year two. So there's an actual office, or there's a staff that's looking at second year. So what happens from students from first year to second year, what is their transition? What are the gaps? And then the final year, we have a team again in student engagement that's looking at, graduation and some of the challenges why people delay graduation or don't graduate. And so we're just starting to find out, these are the things that the university at large has identified, and how can we plug into it, and how can we have, from a policy standpoint, have a voice when they're thinking of developing these programs, and also thinking about international.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're describing about the first year, and then kind of maybe the drop off in consistent and intentional engagement, is not unique, not just a Northwestern thing. I think that's a lot of places have a first year experience, very concerted effort to make sure that students are plugged in. And then we just kind of assume that they are after that and don't come back to it at the sophomore year. So that's super, super cool and innovative to hear. Nick, what about you guys? In terms of retention, is there a separate goal for international than there is for like the overall student population?
If there is, I don't know about it. I mean, I think that, you know, at a large institution with, you know, programs across the board, you know, in different schools and divisions, it's hard maybe to speak to, you know, a universal retention rate. I don't think that, you know, is something that we really get involved in, but I think we support it perhaps indirectly, you know, in the work that we do for those programs, you know, and, you know, I think Tyler made the point earlier, you know, the needs of different, you know, academic levels of students are going to be very different. You know, I mean, a first or second year undergraduate student is going to be supported in a completely different way from a graduate student who's in on either 9 or, you know, 15 or 21 month, you know, program. And I think what we've all also seen in the past, and I don't think this is COVID related or even Trump related, we've seen a proliferation of professional master's programs that have really, you know, kind of, you know, added a need, you know, for support at that level that, you know, has to be addressed, you know, and of course, there are only so many people, and there's only so much, you know, of a specific resource to go around before, you know, you really have to start to evaluate, you know, how you are supporting some of those programs, such that they can be successful and that they don't, you know, lose interest or, you know, word of mouth doesn't, you know, decrease their value in a way. And so, how do we support that, and how do we know, you know, who's thinking about or formulating, you know, new programs, and being a part of those discussions, I think is incredibly important for all of us, you know, in this space, you know, especially as, you know, as budgets are starting to recover, you know, from COVID, and schools are starting to think about hybrid offerings or potentially fully remote offerings, bringing students in atypical or non-traditional, you know, ways is, you know, kind of a new challenge for those of us, you know, in this field to have to navigate and support, right? You know, I think that's part of it as well. It's not necessarily, you know, saying no or becoming so creative that you're beyond parameters of, you know, university policy or, you know, immigration regulation. It's how do you actually find proper, you know, and appropriate solutions for the, you know, strategic, you know, objectives or goals of the institution in that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that sets up perfectly for kind of talking about the more tangible aspects of what we do and what sorts of departments we can collaborate with in order to solve those problems, whether they're on the student level or more the strategic vision level. So Amanda, I'm going to come to you again. Can you talk to us a little bit about a couple of departments that you guys have collaborated with at UST in order to support student success, and maybe what sorts of problems you guys were trying to solve by doing that?
Yeah. So our office, actually the person who does a lot of the programs and outreach and orientation, extended orientation, within the last year or so has become also the retention person for us. So like assistant director for retention and programs for international. So there's a natural collaboration there between the director for retention, Center for Student Achievement, all the student achievement, you know, facing programs for the academic reasons why a student might struggle, right? To be retained, to be successful, or whatever metrics you'd like to call that, usually academic. But then additionally, that also brings in wellness. We've really amped up our partnership. We've always kind of had one, but it's become more important. I think everybody knows that, you know, during the pandemic and post, with the Center for Wellbeing. And so making sure that we have a really awesome partner there. Students are immediately brought there as a part of orientation from the get-go to understand what the resources are, to help break up some of that stigma, to see the space, be comfortable going there, not just for maybe medical things, but, you know, also like their mental well-being. And so that's two cool pieces for that. Additionally, housing, that's always going to be a huge partner, right, for international. But for housing, we've actually implemented a university-wide 2-year residency requirement. So that second year is not lost on anybody either as to where do the supports fall and how can we help make sure that, you know, there is more wraparound support for a student if they're in a hall with, you know, more help than maybe somewhere off campus or something like that. And so we work really closely with residence life as well from the very beginning. I was thinking about, like, especially when Geet was saying like second year and fourth year, to us, like retention starts or like second they get here. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure that there is a lot of focus on first year, right? Especially for like me, I brought them here. You know what I mean? I know them at that point. I'm the one that's really gotten to know them over the time that we've been working together. But you know, for us, like maybe a student financially has a hiccup or things like that, we know that's a huge problem in the pandemic with families, you know, businesses suffering and things like that. So the sooner that we can build a relationship as our office with them, the sooner that we can help direct them into different spaces that they may need for resources on campus since they do know us, and really relying heavily on how close we are with our students. We are a smaller school. And so that piece of that personal relationship as a retention tool is very, very important. And then us having good relationships enough to know where those resources are, who's catching students, and making sure we're all collaborating and talking about hiccups that students are hitting. Like if the music department notices something, they know to come to us too as another person that could support a student.
I'm glad you just mentioned that. Has there been ways that you guys have kind of raised your profile within the institution so that they come to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, like we were saying before, reactive versus proactive. We've been very proactively reaching out to people for a long time. But I think as international population has been growing since 2020 for us, that I think it's maybe an easier way to be like, hi, we have more students now. Like we need to make sure that, you know, it's not this smaller group that you thought. Like it's a sizable population now where they are more present. And so then because of those relationships we've built with, you know, domestic orientation, student affairs, Center for Wellbeing, housing, like all the parts of campus that a student would ever experience, is aware of, you know, their specific needs without being othered, you know, like that's a fine line, I think, for a lot of people too.
I know another specific example that I don't think that you mentioned right now, but you've told me before in the past is your relationship with the dining hall.
Yeah.
And being collaborative with them about how they can best serve your students. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So they worked with a couple different ways that affect international population as a whole. We have a Muslim chaplain. We are a Catholic university, but don't have to be Catholic. We're not, I would say, like super religious as a university. But we have a huge Muslim population on campus, domestic and international. And so, like, for example, we have, you know, halal meals served. During Ramadan, there's meals served at different times, takeaway boxes. I'm sure a lot of schools do those things. But it was a really concerted effort actually on dining's part. They even had like recipes students could submit, and then the student actually was able to like get in the kitchen. This is pre-COVID, get in the kitchen with the staff and teach them like, okay, like here's like what we're looking for when I want you to make this specific curry or things like that. And so I think they've been really making an effort to make sure that everybody feels represented in their dietary choices, making sure that if they are going to be, you know, serving food, that it's authentically made and to what, you know, students would like to see when they're on campus. Because I think that is a big piece of students' transition experiences, finding the food that they're hoping for, you know. So
Yeah, you had spoken about it also on the kind of the recruitment side and the like as they are arriving to campus. Sometimes you mentioned before everybody else during the call that that they might get here before all the other students and before all the other services are opened. And so making sure that the dining halls are open in order to meet their needs and so that they feel comfortable, which I think is
definitely. Yeah, it's been a good collaborative effort in terms of the off-campus student retention too, because we've traditionally been very Minnesota centric, and that we're a Division I school now. So like there's a lot more students from out of state now. And it's a cool way to be like, look, other people who can't go home. Like we really need to be, you know, more inviting of students who are going to be here on weekends and breaks and things like that. And so it's been cool to see that shift even over the last 5 years, for them to be more present and aware of that need.
Sure.
Amanda,
Awesome.
you bring such a good point. Like we've been talking about this in Northwestern since I started, like the need of housing and meals like around the academic year, like closing for winter. We just dealt with this. And we're hoping in the next year that, we can, if anyone's living on campus, that they're not, they're living in spaces that don't close. I feel like that's something that we're still trying to tackle. I mean, of course, we have been able to get people into winter housing, but it's a big inconvenience, right? Like you're thinking about finals, and then you have to think about moving and doing all of that stuff. And so we're finally, I'm very optimistic, but I think that that's something that's such an important policy thing that's like, it should now be the standard, you would think.
Absolutely. Totally agree. It's been, I think a lot of schools struggle with that, unfortunately. Yeah, with the mess that is winter, and people need breaks too, and so you want to be sensitive to people who work here as well.
Yeah.
Nick, what about at your institution? Can you talk about a couple of collaborations with different departments that have been successful for you guys?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones within the past couple of years, working with our, graduate school and with the Bursar's office and the Office of Payroll is really, trying to reconceptualize how we support students through the tax process, historically. And I think all of us, kind of, run into this at this time of the year specifically, who uses what software? Do you bring, people on campus for standalone workshops? Do you offer one-on-one support, et cetera? And I think, now with the different providers, that are available and out there, there is, less of a lift, kind of across the board or internally, and incorporating, solutions that are actually available. And I think of Sprint Tax or Glacier. I mean, I think there are a number of them out there, but how then do you, kind of piggyback on that support, across the institution in a way that is intentional and can, kind of address some of the issues, that come up specifically from students. And that can be, certainly from, undergraduate students, but, graduate students who are on funding from the university, and I think we've started to get, questions from students who are now tax residents for those purposes. And while we provide the, this support for non-residents, why are we not providing the same support, for residents? And it's a valid question. So I do think, as some of these things, become a little easier and, there's more, not to use, the word synergy, but there is, more synergy from inside and outside the institution, that's going to create, new challenges that have to be, kind of thought about and addressed. So I think that's one. I mean, there are a number of others. I think, collaborating with alumni relations and development is invaluable from both, the recruitment, but the retention, perspective. And Tyler and Amanda, mentioned career services, as did Geet, and counseling and health services. These are all, and to go back to what I was saying earlier, these are all capable, and incredibly vital offices, that support the work of all students, or the overall success of all of our students, and relying on them, to do their jobs, is part of that, as well, and not, overcomplicating the situation, which I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, I love that you just said that for two reasons. One, because not overcomplicating it and allowing them to do their jobs. They are experts in what they're doing, and we should allow them the opportunity to do it with our students if it's not something that's already kind of on the docket. And the other reason is because I think sometimes we think about these initiatives and we think about how much they're going to cost. And there are things that we can do that are very low cost, that doesn't involve hiring new positions, which we did talk about at the beginning, and which is awesome if we can do that, but that's not always an option for us. Tyler, what about you? Can you speak to a couple of departments that you guys have collaborated with and what has worked well for you?
Yeah, of course. I would highlight two, but I think Amanda, really gave a comprehensive look on the different offices and the different support services that international students really rely on. So it's important to kind of strengthen all those relationships, as Amanda had said. I would emphasize two additional ones that we have found quite a bit of success with recently. And the first being the University Advancement Office, where they collect a tremendous amount of data on graduates and the types of jobs that they have and the fields that they're in and the salaries that they're bringing in. But at Lewis, at least, it was all on the domestic side. And so we've been working collaboratively with them for the past couple of years to starting to encourage them and nudging them and to get them to start collecting or trying to collect international student data, because what we're particularly seeking, well, on the side note, it's unverifiable data because there's different systems in place. So we're kind of using this data differently, but what we're looking for is like advocates in certain regions or countries that we can connect with and rely on as like an advocate for the university, as like a success story. So when we do have a new applicant who is asking a lot of questions, we can say, hey, here's so-and-so, he graduated 4 or 5 years ago, he's doing exactly what you're doing. Here's his email address. You're more than welcome to reach out to him if you want to learn what life is like at Lewis University and the types of opportunities that are going to be open to you afterwards. So finding those students has been a very, very helpful tool that the University Advancement Office has helped us with, which is really just comes down to alumni engagement. But the other one, and Amanda did mention it, and I just want to highlight it a bit more, is our health and counseling center. A lot of our international students are always hesitant to use a lot of the free services that we offer. But I would say that the one that they are most hesitant to use is the Health and Counseling Center. And a lot of it simply comes from their own culture back at home. Their institutions don't provide the types of comprehensive services that American institutions do. So there's just a bit of unfamiliarity probably, but that when it does come to questions of mental health, there's also probably a bit of cultural hesitation to get involved with offices like that. So we have gone we've taken additional steps to ensure that our international population is not only familiar with that office, but comfortable using them or simply communicating with them for any types of issues that they are having. We have collected data on it, just like we try to do with everything, and have found that since we've incorporated them into our orientations, as well as twice a semester sort of reminders about that office. But over the past couple of years that we've been doing this, the use of the health and counseling offices has really taken off post-COVID. That the international student population is utilizing that office in a much stronger capacity. So I would encourage anyone here, to make sure that your international students know and are comfortable using that office on campus.
It might be, I have a question about that with the mental health. How are you increasing the level of comfort? It might be through the sessions that you're doing at the beginning and throughout the year, but is there anything else that you're doing to increase that comfortability? Yeah,
so we just have like a recorded session. It's like less than 3 minutes, but it's it's like a mom. It's not like this official video where like they're announcing all this. It's literally just like someone's mom talking to them. It's a very casual, very warm and inviting. And it's not like heavy on if you're struggling, like the language that is used is very intent to sort of get at it's not that you have issues or you're struggling. It's simply that we're here to talk. We're here to talk. And if you need to talk about something, please reach out to us, because we understand that the college students, no matter where you're from, have a lot on their minds and a lot on their plates. And please, keep us in the back of your mind if you ever need someone to talk to. And sort of using that as the approach, and away from like the doctor's appointment, is where we started seeing the sort of that turning point of, oh, this is just like a casual conversation. And once the students get a little more comfortable with that, then the health professionals are able to reach out to the students in a little more official capacity.
That makes sense. It goes back to what Geet was saying about being intentional with the way that we're communicating about what we're communicating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Geet, last but not least, what are a couple of departments that you guys have collaborated with to ensure student success?
Yeah, so I'll talk about, I mean, we definitely collaborate with all of the offices that you guys talked about, but I'll talk about some different offices that we're working with right now for some projects, and they've been really, really good partners. And one of them has been IT. So for our office, you know, technology, and as our students are wanting to connect with us, we have to think about that. Like, we have to figure out where they are at, where are we at with our processes and our turnaround times, and just like the access. And so we've been really working closely with our registrar and our IT offices to really develop better technology of how students get services from us. I mean, I'm not making a plug for Teradata by any means, but we did upgrade, and you know, that's been like a huge project for us. And we not only brought in, you know, our IT and our registrar to see like how the data is flowing in and what is the data that we need that maybe like, you know, traditionally we're not getting. So we're not getting like academic advising data and other data that we might want, so we can better serve the students when they're coming to us. So that's like a big office collaboration, and we're still in the midst of it. So I'll, you know, ask me in a couple months how that's going. But that's really exciting. And, you know, just working with the registrar, one of the things that we're kind of dealing with right now is course modalities. And I don't know if you guys are dealing with that and how they're coded in the system, and, you know, what's actually happening in the classroom and where students are. So we're trying to really work with our registrar to make sure that that department and the people, you know, that put in all of that course modality stuff has really good communication with the faculty and the departments to know the impact of like having an online course or all online sections, or having, you know, a course that's coded in person, but it's really online, and how that impacts immigration and like the stress the student has to deal with when they find out about the regulations and things like that. So we're really trying to work and be ahead of that, because I think with COVID, everyone just kind of got relaxed and did different things. And now we're trying to do a reset with them. And I think that kind of something that Jody mentioned in the chat is like, you know, do you do refresher workshops? We don't do refresher workshops, but that's definitely something we're thinking about is, you know, because again, when students get it in the onboarding phases, they're jet lagged, they're tired, you know, and again, in year 2 or 3, it might be more relevant or a reminder for that. So that's definitely something. Thank you, Jody, for putting that in chat.
Yeah, that's a perfect time to get everybody else's feedback on that question, which was, are there refresher immigration sessions for whether it's CPT or OPT or anything immigration related throughout their academic journey? Has anybody done that, and what has been the success of that?
We at Lewis, we sort of have an automated pre-scheduled set of email notifications. They are very concise, so not to overload students with information, but they go out about every 2 weeks throughout the year. It's a reoccurring preset, pre-scheduled. So students, whether they are new or they're, you know, years into the program, they just run through this cycle of reminders. The idea was that they're, you know, whether they need that information or not, given their timing at the university, that they're going to need it at some point. So it's better to give it all to everyone than to try to like target specific populations. But it has alleviated a lot of the just random questions that come into our office. We you know, we don't have a huge staff, so we're just trying to manage our own time accordingly. Sessions, you know, doing in-person sessions is, you know, it's time out of someone's day that we didn't have the ability to give. But automated emails, absolutely.
I will, you know, I'll say, and like many of you, I mean, one point of feedback we often hear from students is that I get too much email from the university. And I get too much email from the university. Let's be clear. But a couple of years ago, we established an advisory board at the graduate level with international students who really helped us kind of tap into program specific technology. So to Geet's point, understanding how students within a specific program are actually communicating with one another, whether that's Teams, or Slack seems to be very popular. And then, identifying individuals who can on our behalf, send specific information, to those or through those channels, and in large part, I will say most of those student channels are not monitored. The students themselves don't want administrators, which I totally get. But, building that partnership has been incredibly, helpful to us, especially leading up to break periods, information about travel. I think to Jody's point, information about, internships, for cyclical programs where we know students, are frantic about, accepting offers or, recruiting and trying to figure out where they want to go. And sometimes it's not, plugging, all the regulation, in those channels, but it's saying, hey, look, there's this, virtual, workshop on this thing that, is specific to this topic, and we found that to be incredible, complementary, I think, to the newsletters and some of the other, ways that we communicate to students, across the board. But it's a challenge that I know we all face, and I don't know the answer to it. I mean, I will also say, I mean, we do our best with Instagram. I think we've all but given up on Facebook. There's a WeChat, channel out there that is, we have at least a collaborator in Beijing through our center there, who can kind of, help us with some of that information, but it's just an ongoing challenge that I think, continues to evolve, right? And it's an important one.
Yeah, what you said about it not being monitored, I find really interesting. I had a colleague once who said that that's the creepy treehouse syndrome, where your parent builds you a treehouse and wants to sit in it with you instead of letting you just sit in it by yourself. So
we call it wet blanket. We don't want to be a wet blanket in the room, to that end. But yeah, it tracks for sure.
So I'm going to have another question for you guys, but please feel free to put anything in the chat, any questions that you guys who are listening have. But for the kind of last question that I have while we wait for that, and we'll start with Geet here, is we've been talking all about the positives for collaborating, and I'm wondering if you can just give us, I don't want to say any negatives, but any things to look out for when you're starting a new collaboration with different departments.
Yeah, I mean, I call them the truths, right? Because I think there is a fine line, and I have this conversation all the time because I have people that are very zealous and they really are excited about helping, and they want to know like all of the immigration regulations. I see this in the career development office sometimes, and again, I totally get it because they have all these students in front of them, and they want to have the answers, and it's much more comfortable. And so we start the conversation with, this is educational information. You do not want to be in the position of giving immigration advice or, being an international student advisor. Like there's a lot of training that goes into that. There's a lot of like checks and balances into that advice. So you want to be really careful. And you don't want to just Google things. I mean, even for like staff on campus or faculty, very well-intentioned, maybe they've gone through the experience themselves. They were an international student, and they have this, they feel very like comfortable giving advice, and we're very cautious. We want to be good partners, but we also want to do education, and we want to say like, direct people to our website, direct people to their advisors, direct people to our front desk, phone line, if someone's really panicked and needs help right now. Just like I wouldn't want to give counseling advice or even career advice That's our area of specialization. And so it's really important that students are directed to us for that kind of advice. But you can give all kinds of other advice, but just not to stay away from that. And again, we manage that the best we can, but we really start off at all partnerships sharing like, okay, what's our mission? What is something that only our office can do? Because I think that there's also this thing about, international offices or OISS or, we can do everything for international students. And, sometimes we have to say, this is our specialization and this is what we do. And then these are other areas that we advise and collaborate. And so it's good to have that clarification when you're starting off a partnership.
Absolutely, from the get-go, what the goal is of the collaboration and also what the boundaries are of that collaboration. And that really just protects everybody, the student, the staff on both sides, and the university. Tyler, what about you? Any words of wisdom of things to be aware of?
Yeah, I think, I think Geet nailed it. It's really that when other offices kind of muddy the waters of trying to give immigration or visa related advice. But to add to that is when academic advisors or other departments don't cue us in on things that are going to become a visa related issue. We have student advisors that work with students who fall onto academic probation when their GPA drops too low. And students are given time to get themselves off of academic probation, but if not, they're asked to leave the university. And we always hate to be the last person to know when a student is being asked to leave the university, because it has much larger repercussions than simply telling the student to go find somewhere else to study. So whenever there are offices working with students that are advising them on matters like that may have an indirect effect on their status, always just keep the best communication with them as possible. So you are cued into when academic issues become status issues.
And there's a question in the chat that I think goes to what you're speaking about with regard to CPT. Do you guys have kind of clear lines that faculty can be aware of for CPT related issues?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we definitely have very clear lines for CPT because we have very, like a lot of brilliant students that want to do all kinds of work. And I think the other thing I would mention is when talking to partners, like, I think it's very natural to use like terms that we're familiar with. And I always try to use like very basic terms. And sometimes I don't even use CPT or OPT, or I'll use them, but I'll just say what it means is work authorization off campus. If anyone's coming to you about work authorization off campus, please direct them to us, because there's lots of like regulatory issues with that. So if they don't remember what CPT and OPT or anything else is, academic training, they can just remember, okay, work authorization or working off campus, I need to direct them to OISS. So I think that also like using the language depending on the partner you're talking to is really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Amanda, what about you and your team? Can you talk about a couple, maybe something to be aware of or thing to look out for when you're starting a new collaboration?
Well, I feel like really Geet just nailed it, like Tyler said. So I'll take a different spin from a recruitment perspective, maybe about a new partnership or adventure. I feel like we're all different universities, but a lot of people maybe have never heard of you and they don't know anything about you. And I feel like making sure that like when you are sharing about your university for prospective students, and if it's not you talking, whether it's your in-country rep or it's an agent partner or a high school counselor, like understanding some of these regulations, right? But not to the point where they're advising. But also like I would say rigor of a university, like really making sure that like it's going to be a good fit for a student, because retention, you don't want a student to get there and be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't realize like what I had signed up for, because, there's thousands of schools. Maybe they thought, oh, it's a small school, it'll be like this easy school. And it's like, no, like that's not who we are. You know what I mean? And so like, I would say if you're starting a collaborative recruitment partnership, making sure that like that rigor piece is really clear from an academic retention standpoint for any new collaboration you take up, whether it's local or abroad.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you so much. And Nick, I'll give you the final word on that.
Thanks. I echo obviously what others have said, and I would also just add that collaboration, obviously, there's a spin that this is always positive and productive and successful, but it can also really contribite to kind of mission creep, and before you know it, you're doing more for others that is detracting from your core kind of function within the institution. And so collaborate on your terms. I mean, I think a lot of time that I spend is actually trying to understand what we're collaborating on or what's being proposed and why. What is the core issue, in a way that gives us the opportunity to evaluate whether we are the right office to be collaborating with, and whether we should be getting into this. And I think it's important from a team perspective, because all of these collaborations are terrific, but it really does kind of add to the existing plate of all of our advisors and associate or assistant directors and others within the office. And if you're not preserving some of the work that they're doing, it can quickly kind of detract from other areas within the office. So I would just say collaborate on your terms in an intentional and aware capacity, such that you're not kind of getting involved in things that don't necessarily warrant your involvement.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on, really taking a hard look at the evaluating what the goal is of whatever that partnership could be, and what your goal is and mission is as an institution and as a department in and of itself. So it looks like we have some questions, but they've been answered in the chat, specifically about CPT and credit and not credit or not bearing credit. So I just wanted to thank you guys so much for being panelists. It was so great to hear all of your perspectives and coming from completely different institutions, and what your experience has been, both positive and things to look out for with collaborating, both for recruitment and for retention. As you all can see who are listening, I did include everybody's name here and email address. If you want to reach out to them, please go ahead and do so. This will be this has been recorded and it will be posted. And so I'm sure that Kathy will send that out at some point. And other than that, we will see you guys in February for the Bob White session. So thank you guys again for the awesome conversation.
And I'm just going to say thank you for Mackenzie for putting together such an awesome panel. Very great job. Welcome to the Roundtable Committee. We're happy to have you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And yes, hope to see you in February.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Please reach out if you have any questions or anything we can discuss further.
We appreciate that.